Well, good afternoon, everybody. You know, being in a room full of people talking about history brings me back into my days as a high school teacher. And this part of the day was always the toughest part of the day to be talking about history. Um, 'Cause everyone had the afternoon slumpies. So stretch if you need to, wiggle around, get some water. But I promise you, these two amazing guests of mine are powerhouses in the field of history, in the field of just cool, interesting people, and I'm happy to introduce them. But to introduce myself, my name is Pedro Antonio Hernández. I hail from the beautiful city of Fresno, California, on Yokuts land. Yeah, give it up for Fresno, everybody. I'm a trained Latin American and Chicano studies historian, and I am happy to be the public lands advocate for the organization GreenLatinos. We're a national environmental justice organization working to achieve environmental liberation and confronting the most pressing needs of the Latino community. And so, yeah, thank you. Um, and you know, when it comes to some of the most pressing needs of the Latino community, the field of history can be a really important and just fascinating tool to understand a people, to understand oneself, and you can use a story to chip away at really huge themes like cultural genocide, imperialism, resistance, even things like romance, which is also on par as far as intense things. But also, geographies can be an important way to understand these large meta themes. And so when it comes to Texas, because this is going to be about Texas, baby, for me, this is a couple of different currents come to mind. One is that my mom actually grew up in Texas, in South Texas. Her family immigrated from Nuevo Leon into the town of Harlingen. And as when I was exploring and actually committing to the field of history, because everyone was like, why are you going to study history? I was actually adopted as a baby historian by my professor, David Montejano, who's an important scholar in just understanding lots of racial politics in South Texas, rise and fall of segregation. And, you know, I tell this story all the time, but he gave me a job because I went to a Chicano studies event when I wanted a burrito. But that was really important because what it culminated in was me actually push me a little over the edge to actually take a chance on myself pursuing history. I didn't know what would come of it. But what I chose to, in my immediate next steps, because I'm thinking this is 10 years of LHC, what was I doing 10 years ago? I was like crying in the main stacks, writing my senior thesis actually on the history of the borderlands between Texas and Mexico, is a way to understand my mother's story. So without this wonderful field and, you know, without Texas as well too, I wouldn't be here, and, you know, we wouldn't be here. So, you know, I'm really happy to introduce these speakers here. Oh, man, I'm already getting emotional. But honestly, dude, Texas is a cool place. The size of Texas is only matched by the actual like size of the history, as well too. So, on my left here, Graciela Sánchez, happy to introduce, the director of the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center, actively working to center the culture of working class and poor people of color, queer people, and women in San Antonio. And on my far right here, who is actually not a far right guy, is David Romo, who's a historian and resident of El Frontera between El Paso and Juarez. Also, a really cool musician. You should ask him about what kind of music he writes and everything as well, too. But that said, enough about, I hope everyone's warmed up. I want to pass the floor now to David here to take it away with about 20 minutes of his work. So thank you.
Is it on? Yes. Thank you so much. You know, I'm from El Paso. I don't really feel like I'm from Texas. I'm from La Frontera. That's a whole country unto itself, really. You know, La Frontera, there's so many regional differences. Like now I can tell if a Latinx person or a Chicana is from different parts, what parts of New Mexico, San Diego. La Frontera here in San Diego has so many parallels to what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to talk about Barrio Duranguito, and my colega Yolanda Leiva already gave kind of an overview of that, and I'm going to look into like a micro-history of Barrio Duranguito. We have Lincoln Park, which is very much like Chicano Park, and it actually was inspired by what was going on in Chicano Park. And I was very inspired by the band yesterday. I don't know if Rick Sánchez is here. I saw the accordionist. So I'm in a band called Los Liminals. And people say Los Criminals? No, Los Liminals. You know, it's a word that comes from the Latin word limitem, frontera. So basically, when we say Los Liminals, we're kind of calling ourselves Los Fronterizos, right? La gente que no es ni de aquí ni de allá, but simultaneously from both places, right? We're constantly code switching. So I'm going to talk to you. Well, before I do that, I just want to tell you that I just wrote a book, and it's going to come out next week. But I actually have it's called Borderlands in the Mexican-American Story by Penguin Random House. And they gave me the opportunity to choose somebody to read it. And I chose, Renee, do you think we can play that? No, we can't, okay. I'm gonna read you the introduction because it goes to the heart of what so many of you have been talking about. And I have to say that I'm inspired, mucho respeto por todo el trabajo que han hecho ustedes. Mexican Americans have sometimes been called the forgotten people. They are the people who have disappeared through the cracks, the in-between people. They don't fit in one category or stay in one place. They cross borders, although they originally didn't cross the border. Rather, the border crossed them. Their ancestors have been living in what is now the American Southwest long before it became part of the United States. We'll learn more about that later on. So this is a book directed mostly at youth, but it's also for the young at heart, even if you're 60 or 70. Much of Mexican-American history has been ignored or erased. In recent years, white politicians and school board officials in some southwestern states, like Arizona and Texas, have prohibited students from learning the full truth about Mexican Americans. They are afraid that if students find out about this history, they might ask difficult questions. These politicians and officials say learning the truth about the past might cause division and bad feelings. The Mexican American students who learn about injustice in the past might get angry. They might want to change how things have always been done. Sometimes people want to forget the bad parts of history, both those who are ashamed of what they did and those who suffered through it. Sometimes learning about history hurts. It feels like a wound. But if you want to heal from these wounds, we first have to learn the truth. We have to remember. Remember Duranguito. That's the name of another book that I have. I have a few books of these left. I have other books available right outside in a little mesita out there. Duranguito is a place that beginning in 2006, it's a neighborhood. It's the Barrio Logan of El Paso. And beginning in 2006, the city of El Paso decided that it was going to destroy between 10 and 15 acres of this neighborhood to build a sports arena. I'm going to take you through a little tour. people for a long time didn't even know that it was called Duranguito because the city had changed its name to Barrio Union Plaza, not even Barrio, just Union Plaza. Welcome to Duranguito. Welcome to the birthplace of El Paso. This is a sign that we put up there. For a long time, this has been a contested place for a very long time. And the names that have been attributed to this very small slice of geography have been very, have been part of that contested history. So it's been called by the Ende people, Yatu Ene, which means the place where the river turns sharply. Because as you know, the Rio Grande starts in Colorado, goes to the south. At this place called Duranguito, it makes a sharp turn. That was one of its original names. Los Puertos. Why? Because when some of the first Españoles came to this part of the world, that was the entrance into what is now US property. And remember, I mean, there had been many incursions by soldiers, explorers, missionaries before, but the first people that deliberately settled what is now the United States passed through Duranguito back in 1598 with Juan de Oñate. And that was 20 years before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. And so people called this part of the world, the border, the other Ellis Island, the other Plymouth Rock. And we say, why? We've been there way before Ellis Island. There was a trail that connected Mexico City, or Mesoamerica, if you count the indigenous period, to what is now Santa Fe. And that has been going on in the indigenous times for thousands of years. So why is it that the origin story is always told from east to west, rather than from south to north, right? So that's already this little piece of land is contesting what we think is our story in this country. It was also called El Pueblo de los Mansos. It was part of the official Jurisdicción de los Mansos when the Españoles confirmed this terrain, and now we're talking about 1650. Duranguito was for a long time called La Otra Banda del Río, because most of the Spanish settlement, especially after America's first revolution, the Pueblo Revolt in 1680, everybody, the Españoles, the northern part of the Spanish Empire was right up to the river. So everything on the other side, La Otra Banda del Río, was indigenous ground. El establecimiento de los Apaches de Paz. So there was a camp with 800 to 1,000 mezcaleros, Natahende. People call them Apaches, they call themselves Ende, the people. And these were precursors of the kind of what we see as reservations. We think that the first reservations were done in the times of the American occupation of these lands. No, it was actually the Spanish colonizadores that had created the first reservation systems. So they gave people passports. They had to carry a document, and their movement was limited to 10 leguas, about 26 miles. They were the first passports to restrict indigenous mobility in this part of the world. And it was this camp in Duranguito that had the first passports. People that didn't respect that would be arrested, and they would be deported to Mexico City, sometimes all the way to Cuba. So you have many of the similar repetitive histories going on today were already going on in Duranguito at this time period. We're talking about the 1790s. It was called Chivos Bravos. Rancho Ponce de Leon was the first Mexican land grant in 1827. Then it was called Coons Ranch when Ponce de Leon was forced to sell it to an American, because the first thing that the US invasion forces did when they went into Paso del Norte was destroy all the records at the Mission. When you destroy the archives, then you can't prove that you own your land. So the destruction of our history, of our records, has always gone hand in hand with military occupation, a kind of ethnic cleansing. And that's part also of the history of Duranguito. So it's gone out with many, many different names. It was called the First Ward. Later, it was called Duranguito, beginning in the 1900s. And then later, the city wanted a gentrifying project, and it called it Union Plaza. And then just recently, beginning in 2006, it was called the Arena Footprint Area, because that's where they wanted to put the arena. So all kinds of displacement, all kinds of disputes over this very small slice of land. So I do a walking tour, about 18 buildings. I'm gonna go really, really quickly. So the city of El Paso says Duranguito has absolutely no history. And we have tried for so many years to try to get national landmark recognition. The city and the developers have worked actively. I mean, they spent tens of thousands of dollars to deny our applications. So this is one building, the Coffin Residence. It was El Paso's first wooden frame house. So that in itself, every single one of these buildings tells the story of power, of resistance, and accommodation. So even the fact that this is wood in a place that, well, indigenous people built with adobe, right? The fact that now you have wood, which isn't very good for the desert, it's not available, and it burns easily, is also part of that struggle. Why are you eliminating the adobe structure? Well, because the new immigrants, the Anglo immigrants, want progress, so they don't want these backward materials, right? So even in that, the materials that are being used. This is the second house in my walking tour. That's, people in El Paso called Pancho Villa's stash house because it was supposedly where Pancho Villa stored weapons and money. It's more complicated than that, but it is true that this was a place where there was a lot of underground plotting going on during the Mexican Revolution. It was a very important place because of its location. Duranguito was right in the middle of the railroads that go east and west, north and south. So this is the Flor de Luna house. And so remember, the city wanted to destroy all of this. To them, it was not history. So this was built by one of the richest, wealthiest women who personally knew Benito Juarez. And she had all kinds of connections, transnational connections between both sides of the border. Her name was Venancio Escarate Stevenson. And it was constructed in 1885. But again, to the developers and city officials, none of this was of much importance. 1885 is around the time that General Crook was chasing after Geronimo, right? That's how old this. So this is one of the last remaining landmark associated with the largest Chinatown in Texas. El Paso had the largest Chinatown in Texas because of the railroads. So it was a laundry. It tells, every single one of these spaces merits a Ph.D. really. So this is one of the buildings in Duranguito that has the history of the Chicano movement. So the Comité de Defensa Democrático in the 1980s, that was very much part of a very strong Chicanx movement in this time period, occupied this building when the city wanted to destroy it. They wanted to condemn it, and they just took over. They just squatted, right? And people got arrested several times, and they were able, thanks to some of the Chicano business community, to buy the building, restore it, and then later, it was one of the most renowned leaders of the Chicano movement, Lopez Reyes Tijerina, who lived there until his death in 2015. So sometimes there's kind of this vortex of repetitive history. This is a fire station that was built by one of the most famous architects in the Southwest. His name is Henry Trost. And there was some historic preservation, is that they didn't really care about the other buildings too much, but they formed an alliance with us because of this one building, because Henry Trost is such an important, and so that's another thing when you're trying to save or preserve spaces, whatever has connection to your community often is not valued, right? At most, it's seen as kind of vernacular architecture, whereas Tros was, and that's why we got some of this support from outside sources, from the white preservationists. So all of this is in one street, by the way. In this one street, you have Casa Vides. So Casa Vides now is a migrant refugee center. So I don't know if some of you have heard that in Texas, Governor Abbott has called Annunciation House a Catholic. They minister to refugees. They've called it a stash house. Well, this is one of those houses that they're calling that, right? So do you see how all these buildings now have different histories of power and resistance and accommodation? It's all there, just almost crammed, right? So that's what you do when you do microhistory. That's a kind of history that I do. Sometimes I call it global microhistory, that you're looking for these little clues, almost like a detective, like Sherlock Holmes, when you see some clue that other people might throw away, and then it turns out to have much deeper meaning, right? And a lot of these stories, we have them everywhere in La Frontera, in the United States, but it's up to us to really pay attention, to understand what those little details that might at first seem insignificant, what is their true meaning? So this was one of the places where Pancho Villa used to buy his Dodges when he was assassinated in Parral. He was driving a Dodge and he bought it from there. So once again, El Paso and the border were hugely important because of its location. The Mexican Revolution didn't begin in El Zócalo in central Mexico. It began really on the border. I mean, that's what was its launching pad. Thanks to places like Duranguito, where you could supply the troops, where you could hide, do espionage, smuggling, arms smuggling. So these are some of the people. This is who are part of Duranguito's history. In Zazen, he was a mezcalero Apache that went up to the Españoles and said, hey, I want to create peace with you. If you want peace, well, give us some of your horses. You don't want us to steal your horses? Just give them to us. Give us a kind of war tax, right? So Zazen was one of the Nantan, the spokesman for the mezcalero community. This one, Juan María Ponce de León, he was one of these wealthy merchants from El Paso del Norte that had a house in Duranguito and he owned the land grant. So just very quickly, there's an indigenous woman, Juana Marquez Dao, that was married to the first mayor of El Paso. When the mayor passes away, she becomes the wealthiest owner of Duranguito, right? All these hidden stories that are usually not part of the official history. That's Venancio Azcárate Stephenson, who was one of the wealthiest women that owned that Victorian era house that I showed you. Gilbert Rowland, he was an Español that escaped to El Paso during the Mexican Revolution, and his father and grandfather were toreros, and he was basically the Antonio Banderas of the silent film era, right? He was from Duranguito. Cleofas Calleros, he was from Duranguito. He armed, the Ku Klux Klan took over a lot of El Paso institutions in the early 1920s. And he armed a whole bunch of Catholics and Mexicans with bricks and bats to make sure that the Ku Klux Klan didn't march in downtown El Paso. I mean, there's so many stories. That's Mario Chavarria. He was a Vietnam veteran, a cook, a construction worker, writer, muralist, and Chicano activist who took over that building that I talked to you about. There's Reyes Lopez Tijerina. A lot of what he did was in El Paso. So I know the Sacred Heart Church is trying to, is part of the project of restoration. The gym itself was the first meeting of La Raza Unida Party in 1972 of the Sacred Heart Church, and he was there. And so finally, this is Toñita Morales, and she really is la guerrera. I mean, it's always las mujeres that are at the forefront, and she is our spiritual leader of the resistance against Duranguito. She's been in Duranguito since 1965 and has been fighting for it all that time. So we just came, and whatever skills we have, we kind of package the history, kind of what we're doing. And I got to say that sometimes history can be effective. So how did we stop the bulldozers? Thanks to the Apaches, believe it or not. There's a Texas antiquities law. We took the city to court because before they can destroy any buildings, they have to do an archaeological survey. And underneath Duranguito, we were able to prove with our research and some of the Spanish colonial archives that there was archaeological remains, probably including human remains. And so that stalled the city's attempt to try to build an arena there for years. And finally, in 2023, thanks to women like also Romelia Mendoza, who's the last remaining woman in one of the streets in Duranguito, also bought her building in the 1970s and said, you know, me voy. I'm not gonna let a rich person tell me where I should live. Thanks to them, and thanks to the support of a lot of people. Really, it took a village to save this neighborhood. We were able to stop the bulldozers. And just like people are singing songs to Barrio Logan 50 years later, we wrote a corrido, Los Liminals. And I don't have a guitar, but you know, you hear the tundata. En el 11 y el 12 de septiembre llegó la chota queriéndonos sacar de nuestro barrio que le dicen Duranguito, pero la gente no los dejó pasar. Que viva Duranguito. Remember nuestra historia. Muchas gracias.
Do I get a pointer before we start my time? Yo soy Vicente, yo soy villancico y vengo a cantar al niño que llora y hacerle callar. Ni, 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 so, 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 no llores más mi vida, no llores más, ya no. I don't know, maybe y'all made me a little nervous, but I sing that to honor my parents. My teachers who taught me about cultural preservation. My father taught us that song. He even created a neighborhood choir for the children of the neighborhood, insisting that we needed to remember these songs, insisting that we needed to share them. So he put together all my brothers, and my sister and I were like, y nosotras? What about us, right? So we were 6, 7, 8, and we jumped on board and learned many, many songs. My father was born in Tampico, pero su papá nació en San Antonio in 1900. My mom was, and my paternal grandparents and great-grandparents were from the border of Laredo and Brownsville. My mother was born in 1923 in the west side of San Antonio and lived there except for the 2 years she promised my father to go to Chicago. Thank goodness she didn't like it and he didn't like the cold, so they came back. I start with an image that I just ran into recently. It's March of 1927 of downtown San Antonio, and you go up on the trolleys, and towards the top middle area is Little Mexico. And this is a trolley ride you want to go so you can get a little sense of what Mexico is without actually having to go to Mexico. But it's, you know, the racist advertisements in the paper. This is about an image of 1929, of San Antonio's west side, about 2 blocks from where we're doing our work. And the reason we know that is because this is San Fernando Cemetery number 1, right behind this building. And then behind that, you see the Tower Life building built in. So this is 1929. And so you can see this inequity of the city that still boasts being one of the top economically segregated cities in the nation today, right? And you can see that it hasn't changed much from then. This is an image of the 1921 flood. So the west side where we do our work is, bordered by the Alazan and Apache courts, and a little bit further east is the San Pedro Creek, not the courts, Alazan Apache creeks and the San Pedro creeks around them. So when all the floods were coming through every other year, they had a major flood, the devastation that took place in the neighborhood. And there's finally a book on this one year of 1921, which basically said, the way the media wrote it up was all the devastation took place downtown, and so the city leaders put all their money into fixing up a dam that basically protected downtown and did nothing for the west side. And it wasn't until the 70s that we put some work into our creeks, basically going from greenways to concrete ways. So I don't know that that what we got was any better, but the floods kind of stopped. This is not good, but a good picture because of the lights, but it's the racial profiling, the segregation of the west side and the east side, the red being the Chicano neighborhood, the yellow on your right being where the black community is. There's also a small little section above on the left side with where the red section is, so there's the black Latino community. And this is the redlining maps of 1938 of San Antonio. And so again, where the red lines, red images are, the red buildings, that's the neighborhood. And you can't really see, but there's a straight horizontal line that goes up, and that's Commerce and Buena Vista. And there's another one that goes horizontal and slightly down south, and that's Guadalupe Street. And that's the area that we really concentrate a lot of our work, because that's really where the working class community is. The other area, there were some sections that were, historically, there were German, Belgian, middle and upper class folks, and the wealthier folks that came from the 1910 revolution that settled in that area that already had class privilege. So my community comes from south of Guadalupe, and my neighborhood got raised in the 70s. And so there's a video that's next. Should I click it or not touch it? Huh? I do this and you all do. And for those who have already seen it, I'm sorry, I have to show it again. This is called La Gloria. And this is from a video that we created in 2002 related to the organizing work that we did to try to save this building, which was, again, south of Guadalupe Street. It was working before. We're never going to get done with me. ¿No va a trabajar? And this is original footage from the 1920s of this building called La Gloria.
Mi abuelita, Doña Maria, is like my God. She's my spirit ghost guardian from the other side. Every once in a while, I pray to her, like Thursday evening after our court hearing. Underneath la luna llena, Koishauki volando, I prayed to my grandmother to watch over La Gloria. With burning smoke, I walked a circle of protection around the building and lit a candle to Santa Marta. Marta slayed dragons. That was her milagro. When they found out that dragons didn't exist, they took away her sainthood. White light burning for Santa Marta. I thought that she and the spirit of my grandmother would help us fight our demonios, our demons, gente hecha de corazón de piedra, que no ven, no escuchan, que no sienten. But the wind was burning strong that evening and blew the candle out. I looked up at the sky and saw the moon embarazada hidden behind the clouds, and I tried to imagine the people dancing on the rooftop of La Gloria. Black dresses brushed the tops of trees as they danced against the sky, 3 shades of blue touching each other underneath a full moon. My grandmother danced here, someone told me, and she is with you now. An 82-year-old woman donated $40 while we were fundraising for the building and said, "I'm going to dance there again," pointing to the dance floor in the sky. My own grandmother, the one I prayed to, never danced at La Gloria, nor did my mother. But that Monday after Easter, when they tore La Gloria down, I cried. Each time the bulldozer hit the building, I felt it in my heart, and I remembered my own history. Mi mami, una sata atrás India y China, inmigrante, inglés hablado con acento, piel morena, nariz de Olmeca. I remembered my own history. My grandmother, warrior woman, body of Coatlicue, partera, tortillas brought fresh from the tortilleria because she refused to cook. I remembered my own history. Mi piel más güera, being made fun of because of the way I spoke English, being made fun of because of the way I spoke Spanish. Each time the bulldozer hit the building, I felt it in my heart, and I remembered my own history, my 6 nieces and nephews, and wondered, who will tell them the stories of their people? Each time the bulldozer hit the building, I felt it in my heart, and I thought silently, this is cultural genocide. To take away our history is to kill our people, our soul, our spirit. I watched them tear La Gloria down and knew that even though my grandmother had never danced there, she was there that day too. With every brick fallen, I heard her say, "We cannot forget."
So, for times, we were front page. We had snipers on us. This was 2002 after, the 9/11. So snipers were watching us the entire time. We gave them the money they asked for, and they still raised that building. And again, it was our own brown and black leadership that helped to do that. Over and over, all these struggles that I'm talking about is about that, sadly. Then here's a Sanborn map when we're trying to save this other building that I'll talk about called Casa Maldonado. I asked one of the staff members, it's like, let's just find that Sanborn map right around here and let's see which buildings have survived. And so the pink one's all gone, right? And so the yellow ones, including the one we were trying to save, was one of these special ones. It's like, well, if it was so special to save back then, why aren't we saving it now? But again, all the leadership was interested in tearing it down. And so we also started doing our own community research. We feel that there's something going on. Anybody that lives close to downtown is obviously being targeted. So again, the left side is the west side, the right side is the east side, for the African American and Latino community members, and the numbers are like that. And so we do this research between 2015 and 2017, and then years later, a professor in Austin, Heather Wade, does the same research and proves the same thing we do, except because she's a professor, she gets legitimized. That's okay, but it would have been good for her to have been in conversation with community. Still, the city leadership and power base rejected her research as well, and she's a professor of law at UT Austin. Then community continues just to get these eviction notices, and this is what we see over and over, just demolition after demolition. So in this case of Casa Maldonado, we had our elders who said, again, stop. You know, we can tell this story because we're alive, but once we die, we can't share that story. But if the buildings survive, at least you can tell this. You know, the kids themselves can see that history, but if the buildings are gone, what's left? So you can see the diversity in ages, and, you know, it's a hard picture to tell, but it's a before and after. But we lost, you know, we barely won at the Historic Design and Review Commission. You couldn't get those Latinas to support it until the white guy said, oh, it reminds me of a building in New Orleans. Oh, okay, then everybody voted for it. But then it went before council, and the council, even under the leadership of Julian Castro, said, take it down, it's not important. But we were able to bring Julian to the space, and fortunately, he just said, all right, let's give him $500,000. So, and it got saved, you know, and it wasn't even our property, right? It was the Community Development Corporation that got $2 million to build a new building. Bacilla Frox is now being saved. It's you know, Syrian building, Syrian owners from 1921 built that and struggled, and then there was many other things that community connected, especially because they're community spaces, like where they went to dance. But the Frox building was where the women made frocks, obviously. Lermas, again, I've only got 5 minutes. So Lermas was built in the 40s. It was owned by Chinese. It was down below is, again, what we got a few years ago. But Lermas itself was a nightclub built in the 40s, and up till the time that the city closed it down, it was an active conjunto dance space. Every Sunday, people just would gather. So people started organizing. We were able to stop the demolition, and then it was about raising funds. So you have community members out there, you have kids who play the accordion performing. It takes us many years, right? But finally, again, another moment, I ran into Julian. I said, Julian, do you recognize that the city has not given any money to any Latino cultural center in over 30 years? And that was since 1981 or 80, when they helped, you know, give monies to the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center. That's wrong, right? So they found money. And here's the success of us winning at city council. Finally, we raised $500,000 from the city, $500,000 from the county, and then Esperanza puts another $500,000. And that's kind of before it got done. And last July, we finally got it open, and people were lined up to dance in the 105-degree weather, because not everybody could fit inside, so they had to wait their turn. The work we've been doing around Alazan starts in 2015. Antonia and I get invited to speak to these people who never tell us what they're trying to do, like, except they love the Alazan courts. We love the Alazan courts. But after 2 hours, I said, are you thinking of taking these buildings down? And like, oh, yeah, we forgot to tell you that. So, so we started organizing, and part of how, with the previous buildings and Casa Maldonado, we create the West Side Preservation Alliance, WPA, to bring together community members, nonprofits, anybody that wants to preserve the neighborhood. Trying to rush through this, so I apologize, I'm missing my notes. I'm not even looking at my notes. The good thing about COVID, one good thing was that because we had to go to meetings via Zoom, we were able to really fill up those Zoom meetings with, 100 voices saying they wanted to preserve the Alazan courts. Sarah, who was working at the Esperanza at that time, worked on the 11th most endangered building, so we got that recognized in 2020. They even called, though, to say, do you still need that designation, because they thought it might be too late, and I said, please give it to us. And we were able to save it, we thought, because we got a new executive director at the Housing Authority, and he said, public housing is a human right, and we're not gonna demolish it. Yay. That was in 2021. He just got fired. And guess what's up? What's being threatened for demolition again? So we're going to have meetings with all of you all to help make sure that doesn't happen. And Roberto, who's doing work on with the national parks, please come and talk. This is our work around Univision, just because Antonia likes these photos. You know, it was the Latinos who said stop the demolition. You know, we had a conversation with Julian again. And it's like, Julian, save it. It's like, but Antonia, Graciela, it's an ugly building. It's like the history of KCOR, KWEX, Univision on a local, national, and international level. Do you not get that? He didn't. So they just proceeded, and the Conservation Society had their attorney, and they wouldn't hand over the leadership of our legal team to our folks. So he lost it, and we, as soon as they got the okay to demolish it, we raced back and just tried to put our bodies on there, and that's why we're jumping fences. Antonia got smart and learned that there was another way to go through, so there she is getting arrested. Well, there we are. We didn't stop any of that, but I think people were ashamed of us getting arrested, so they bailed us out after quite shortly. And I know I've just run out of time. The East Side also saw, the Black Latino community also said, hey, help us out. They're gonna, we saved this bridge. Now they're trying to take away the land beneath the bridge, and they want to connect and build a brewery, and then they're gonna have access to the bridge itself. So we worked with them. They saw what we were doing, and they reached out to us. As that says, what does it say? Remember Alamo beer, blood money. So, and then we learned about viewshed. It's like, don't break, stop the view being lost, which would have happened with the brewery. And we had to go all the way to Texas Supreme Court. So from 2011 to 2019, we're organizing around this, right? While we're doing the other things that you've noticed that we're doing, those are all happening at the same time. The WIT building was a few years ago, that printers up and down what is known as Cattleman Square. And right now, our current struggle is to save this Rich Book building. We do oral histories. We find these photos of these amazing people. We've taken those to the street. We've got museo, en aquellos tiempos, fotohistorias del West Side. The woman and her daughter here many years later. The one-year-old child is my mother, who's standing next to that. And then what we're building up is this rinconcito. I just passing the work again of cultural grounding, cultural preservation for our people, so that they know that they love our West Side and that they don't agree to take down buildings because we don't deserve them, but also because we don't like old stuff. I know I've run out of time. Mr. Vidales, who turned 100, but behind him, this was during COVID, and behind it is the adobe structure we built for Mujer Artes, which is the first adobe building built in San Antonio in over 100 years, or 150 years, sorry, because as you said, adobe was, the Germans wanted to make money off of their lumber, so they outlawed it. And this is our Women's Clay Cooperative that's inside that building. And then the structures that we're now building up. So our Casa de Cuentos, where we do oral histories, Mujer Artes, the future museo. Sorry, I ran out of time. I'm not going to even go through that. During COVID, trying to do the women in activism of the West Side. Check it out on our website. And this is what it looked like on paper. It's pretty much done now. And these 7 structures that we got for $37,000. It's going to cost $1 million to fix them up. But this is the area, but we're going to, I can't read without my glasses. Tell me what it says. Oral history. Casa de Curanderas, because they were around, so we're bringing them back. A little cafe and a research center, and so all of it'll be about 13 buildings. And then we have our scholars like Tomás Ibarra Frausto teaching young people how to make papalotes. We have the tenant from the Alazan courts teaching young people from New Orleans how to make papel picado. And, you know, again, our folks doing the adobe itself, and then marching to the public housing, and working against gentrification. Mi barrio no se vende. We've created the first community land trust in the city of San Antonio to keep people who make $25,000 or less in their home and preserve their homes. So.
Dude, wasn't that cool? I want to, okay, is that correct with the time left? Ah, good. Well, okay. Okay, cool. It's good to know. We're used to getting about like 3 minutes in front of city council, so we'll do an exercise in brevity. Can you pull up the remaining slides, please? But I think when we were planning out this discussion last week, LOL, we discussed just more broadly, right? Like there's a need for more formal, like institutional support towards these efforts, and so I'm going to take the next 3 minutes to talk a little bit about some of our work here at GreenLatinos. Due to the fact that the theme of this discussion is community-led initiatives as well, and so I got to say, just credit to where credit's due. Selah has been very instrumental in just raising this issue at our organization and being an amazing thought partner and just like hype person and supportive mentor in general. And thanks to Selah, I used the word practitioner in my vocabulary now. But more broadly, we know there's a need. We know there's a lot of folks who work on the hyper-local level, either on grassroots campaigns or maybe having some short-term funds from foundations to preserve individual sites. But currently, there's still a policy gap in federal policy to help preserve Latino histories. And so I'm just going to do a quick overview to contextualize this and get to our solution. So the big picture, save this later, take a picture if you want, but more broadly, the modern heritage conservation policy is about 60 years old, when colonization and the destruction of our cultures and heritage is about 500 years old as well too. So on the scale of things, it's a late start and the need's very large is the main theme here. And while there's been a couple of different initiatives from private individuals or from federal programs such as the National Historic Preservation Fund, overall, these programs are underfunded, and also the agencies that administer these programs and provide support to local folks are also underfunded and understaffed. Shout out to MPS folks in the audience here. But no surprise, we know the Latino community supports conservation of historic sites and conservation of nature. But also, we know that less than 8% of the sites in the National Historic Register of Places are associated with the histories of women, Latinos, African Americans, and other minorities. Out of the 96,000 sites of the National Historic Register, only 190 sites specifically preserve Latino history. And out of the now 428 national park units, only 24 specifically or in part preserve Latino history. And we know, of course, that the population is growing. And so what we did here at GreenLatinos was try to map some of the Latino sites in the National Park Service, and you can see a broad geographical distribution that mostly focuses on the U.S. South and Southwest. You have a couple of outliers in Alaska and Seattle and, I think it's Boston. But more broadly, we see there's a huge gap in the rest of the country. We also see that it's been very difficult for for individual organizations to advocate to have your locally significant area uplifted from a site of local significance or state significance to national significance. But what we see here also is that the population growth is occurring the fastest in some of these areas where there are no nationally significant Latino sites as well, too. So the situation we find ourselves in now is that a lot of the Latino hotspots, Southwest, Chicago, have a couple of sites. Areas that don't have any right now have the highest rates of Latino growth. And so when we think about things in the future, 50 years or 100 years from now, we're going to need a policy framework to support this preservation for the long term. And so what we've been advocating for the last maybe year and a half or so, thanks to Sayla again, and hopefully some of you all, is to conduct a national systematic review for reinterpretation opportunities through federal sites. So we know there's sites that exist. We know it can be a potentially easier, quote unquote, lift to add on and interpret and expand the narratives of the existing sites. But we also know that we need to find new sites. And so our solution is the establishment of a national Latino heritage conservation program. We're one of the only communities that doesn't have our own specific conservation program, and this has been part of our culture and our history and our tradition of resistance as well, too. So I'm gonna pause and end here, but if anyone wants to collaborate on fighting for federal funding, figuring out how to contact your congressperson, maybe collaborating on a grant or something, please reach out to myself and my colleague Olivia Juarez right there in the back, raising their hand, and we would love to kick butt with you. So thank you so much, and maybe can we pass it to questions for folks? Órale. Cool. So thank you, everybody. Yeah, we really want to be ambitious. We want to ensure that we have a future, and we want to meet our needs now. So if anyone has questions, feel free to raise your hand. Graciela and David are great, so please ask them some questions if you want. Oh, Sayla has a question. Whoo.
I have a question for Graciela. Graciela and I have talked about this, but I'm just so fascinated that the West Side, that you all at Esperanza moved forward with a CLT. And I'm wondering if once, I know you're very busy, but have you thought about sharing out your process or writing this somewhere so that way we can learn from that?
Give me some time.
An oral history, maybe? What can we do?
Well, I mean, it's a lot. I mean, and it definitely needs to be written. I know different folks have said write a chapter, and some, Char Miller asked me to write a chapter. I didn't write it because when do I have time? So I think it's really hard, and yeah, I mean, slides in 20 minutes go by quickly. So yeah, the detail, and yet. The solutions come from the community, and it moves slowly. I think the fact that the melon is around right now and for who knows how long is an anomaly. It's never happened, right? So we got money also for our museo, but our communities are poor, and so it is about, but the community wants to save, and the community gives their $1, $5 bills. And bills, right, or checks. They still, our elders do that, but it's slow, right? It was their idea to do the museo, and now when I have some of our academics coming in, helping to build out the vision behind it, I hear presentations and I'll say, hold on. It wasn't you all, it was the community, it was, and I named them, right? And most of those elders are gone, but they envisioned it in 2008, right? And it took time to do that work. And sadly, again, we won't have most of them around to see the product, but take it slow, and that you all don't see yourselves as scholars only, or don't see yourselves as people who work for the feds. Like, be community, be with community, we have to do it together, and there can't be hierarchies. Because once that happens, I mean, it happened initially with the West Side Preservation Alliance. We were all together, and then suddenly a lot of the professors started talking about writing, and doing that. And all of a sudden, I saw the folks leave, including people who were teachers, right? And it's like, so they, with master's degrees, but they felt alienated to what they were hearing. So also be cautious of, how we do the work, and giving voice always to the community, being patient, especially with elders. Just be loving and be loved, because they will love you. But feel that you are community and not separate and apart. I think that's really important. And they will help give us solutions as well. And so for us, yeah, let's preserve the buildings, but let's preserve the presence of that community there. And so that community land trust, we're not creating a community land trusts throughout the country are for people who are making $80,000, $90,000, $100,000, which might be affordable for people, but that zip code of 78207, that average income for a family of four is $25,000. The high school graduation rate is 46%. People who have gone to higher education at least 4 years is like 4%, that neighborhood, right? So we have to work with each other and support each other, but kind of think of these other ideas that figure into that preservation, because they're coming. And again, they're ready to knock down the Alasan Apache courts. And once they knock those down, easy, right? Because they're 500, 800 apartments with about, 2,000 people there. So that's what's holding on. And we don't want to knock down the jail either, because that's another impediment. Who wants to be next to the jails or the public housing or the homeless shelters, which is what we have, and that's why we haven't totally gentrified the neighborhood, but it's coming. And so, yeah, we're working. So I'm willing to talk to folks, and maybe if I have a chance to take some time off to write, I will. But
don't leave, Graciela. Hi, it's Robert again. I wanted to let everyone know that well, first of all, the video that you showed I thought was really great of La Gloria, because my maternal grandparents met there. They dated, and that was their place. To see it fall down, that was really heartbreaking. I also just want to let everybody know that Graciela really is a powerhouse. This summer, once again, last year we did Rio Vista. This summer, the HABS program documented the Alazan Apache apartments, also because it was on the endangered list by the National Trust. Graciela was very helpful in putting me in contact with people that would help us document that. So now we've created a set of drawings and a historical report. We took photographs of the Alazan Apache apartments and several historic structures on the west side that are threatened and endangered. And I think that having that go to the Library of Congress in a few months is going to be really helpful for San Antonio and to help document that neighborhood. Hopefully your work will continue, and this is just one way of preserving the memory of that neighborhood. We also documented Lermas, which was great. And actually, at the second barrio last year, when we did Rio Vista, we also sent our photographer down, and I think he spent 1 week documenting various buildings in the second barrio, Duranguito, and those have already gone to the Library of Congress, I think. But just different ways of preserving, and I just want to thank you both for all the work that you do.
Thank you for your work.
Okay. I think we're done. But I just want to say thank you to both of you as well. Dr. Romo, your book is actually what inspired me to go into historic preservation and take my first class. Yes, and now I'm teaching my own class. I use La Gloria video and an article you wrote. So it's just inspiration everywhere.